Okay. Hello, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. My name is Shakayla Albaranga. I'm the Director of Public Programs here at the Mob Museum. Welcome. It's wonderful to see so many of you here tonight for what promises to be a great presentation. So tonight's story takes us back to 1980s Miami, where two Cuban immigrants, Willie Falcone and Sal Magluta, achieved the impossible. What they built, Los Muchachos, would become not just one of the most successful cocaine trafficking organizations in American history, but perhaps the most sophisticated criminal enterprise our country had ever witnessed at the time. We are particularly honored to have with us someone who has accomplished what no other writer has managed, gaining the trust of the elusive Willie Falcone himself. Through countless hours of intimate interviews with Falcone and his inner circle, TJ English has uncovered the real story behind the headlines, beneath the glitter, and beyond the spectacular fall of an empire. TJ English's dedication to uncovering the complex truth behind organized crime has earned him recognition as one of the most respected voices in the field. And tonight he'll take us past the usual stereotypes and sensationalism to reveal something far more interesting: how Los Muchachos built their empire not through violence, but through an intricate web of corruption that reached into every corner of Miami society. Following tonight's discussion, TJ will be signing copies of his newest book, The Last Kilo, in the courtroom waiting area, his 10th book, by the way. Please join me in welcoming Mr. TJ English.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's as always, it's a great honor to be here. I think this is my fourth time here, and it's a pleasure. Most writers of crime books know that this is the top of the heap to be at the Mob Museum giving a talk to an audience such as yourself, because I understand most of you are wannabe criminals. And so I'm going to ask who brought the cocaine tonight, because that's, anyway. I thought I knew about the cocaine era, like most people. I saw the movies, read some books about it, and thought I had a pretty good idea of what the cocaine era was all about. And researching this book and writing this book kind of turned my head upside down. It just reminded me that criminal stories play out at a certain level in the public and in the media, and that's when they get caught and it all comes out in the wash. But there's always so much more below the surface of these stories, so many layers and levels to the story. This one in particular takes us deep into the political and cultural fabric, certainly of the Cuban American experience, but into the cultural fabric of the cocaine era of the 1980s, which was quite an era. I'm not the first person to say it, but the cocaine era of the 1980s may have been the most outrageous criminal era in the United States since the 1920s and the era of Prohibition. And in many ways more outrageous. The body count may have been higher during those years. The levels of corruption are international in the cocaine era, not just national. So let's get into the story of Los Muchachos. Unless you were living in South Florida in the 80s and 90s, you might not know this story. There is a Netflix documentary called The Cocaine Cowboys about Willie and Sal, and there was a previous Cocaine Cowboys documentary also about that era. And I would contend that those documentaries and much of the presentation of this era peddles in stereotypes. There are many stereotypes from this era, and we know what they are: crazed Latinos with Uzis and chainsaws, looking to wreak havoc on everyone. Well, there's more to it than that. This particular story starts in Havana, Cuba in 1955 when Willie Falcone was born. And he had a family that was had a little farm, sort of a middle class life. They weren't poor. They were reasonably well off by Cuban standards. And so when Fidel Castro and the revolution begins to take shape in Cuba, it creates a lot of paranoia and fear within families like the Falcone family and other families who feared what they perceived to be a communist revolution. And that is indeed what it was. And this was a traumatic time for Cuban Americans who were faced with a choice to either stay and try to function under the boot of the Castro government or to leave the land of your birth. And many reluctantly chose to flee the island. The Falcone family was one family that fled the island in the early 1960s. They came over on what were called the freedom flights, dozens and dozens of flights. I think Pan Am was the airline that supplied the planes that brought Cuban families over. And between 62 and 72, I think it was 300,000 Cubans left that little island and came mostly to South Florida, but also to parts of New Jersey, Union City, New Jersey. And this experience, the exile experience, exiles, not immigrants, kind of a different thing to be forced out of your country. And exiles tend to always believe that they're going to go back. This is a temporary condition. They're not intending to immigrate to the United States. They're intending to find some way back. And this is particularly true for a movement within the Cuban exiles that came to be known as the anti-Castro underground, the anti-Castro movement. There was an element within the Cuban exiles in South Florida whose primary mandate in life, in fact, they woke up in the morning dreaming about the death of Fidel Castro. In fact, they woke up in the morning dreaming about strangling Castro to death with their bare hands. It was very personal. It was very personal. And young Willie Falcone felt that way. And by the time he was a teenager, he was taking part in visible aspects of the anti-Castro movement, rallies at parks in the city, protests. There was a visible part of the anti-Castro movement, and then there was a subterranean part of the anti-Castro movement. And that was people who were carrying out covert operations in connection with the CIA. The first and biggest of those covert operations was the Bay of Pigs invasion, which was a notorious failure. And it's kind of a starting point for a certain point of view within the.
So I haven't watched this yet. I've researched it. I know a lot about it, living there as a child, though. I didn't understand it as a child. I understand it now, going to school with the Hispanics, the Cubans, growing up, going down there every few summers. Listen, this is just the beginning. There are other crime syndicates in the area that all at one time became like, what did they call it? The cowboy, he just said it, cocaine cowboys or something. It was a bunch of little, just listen, I promise you, I think this is going to be really good. It's an hour long. We're 10 minutes in. And then I guess if you guys want, and I'm still on, we can go watch Idiot over there with the gong head. I'm kind of tired of her. I want to educate you guys a little bit on money laundering, the drug trade, and how shit works. For real. Okay. This one looks really good. So I sometimes like a little bit of education. feeds the brain.
Cuban community that would lead to many criminal undercurrents. I wrote a previous book called The Corporation, which was about a Cuban American crime group called The Corporation, led by a Bay of Pigs veteran named Jose Miguel Battle. It astounds me even to this day that that story and this story were taking place at the same time, during the same period of time in the 80s, late 70s, 80s, into the 90s. Wow, there was a lot going on in the Cuban American underworld. And none of this was known, generally, none of this was known to us, the public. I mean, we knew about the mafia somewhat, but we didn't know about this Cuban underground. Apparently, occasionally it would pop up in the news. They assassinated the ambassador of Chile, who had met with Fidel Castro. They blew him up in a car on Pennsylvania Avenue. Cuban exiles blew up an airplane, a Cuban airliner, killing 72 innocent people. It was a dirty war that was begun against Cuba by elements of the CIA and the anti-Castro movement. The belief was that Castro was an existential threat to the United States. They tried to kill him. There's a book called 634 Ways to Kill Fidel Castro. Those are plots, not many of them were carried out. There were some real harebrained schemes. I'm sure you might have read about it or know about it. And this is not conspiracy theory stuff. The CIA released the documents and they have admitted to this. So young Willie Falcone is showing up to the rallies. He's making it clear that he's a true believer. And some of the older guys in the movement come to him and a friend of his named Tony Garcia, Tony Bemba. And they said, "You guys look like you're really devoted." "Yes, sir, we are devoted. There's nothing we won't do for the movement." And they said, "Well, we have a plan, and it's fairly ingenious. We are going to bring cocaine into the United States from a source that we have in Honduras. We would like to sell the cocaine in the United States, take the money from that, buy arms and explosives and smuggle them back into Central America to arm the Contras." Some of you may remember the Contras fighting a war against the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. The CIA and the US State Department was concerned that Castroism was spreading in Central America, and Nicaragua became the battlefront. And we had the feeling was the US had to stop it in its tracks. And so they were arming the Contras to fight the Sandinistas, and they were going to use money from sale of cocaine to finance it. Wow, okay. This is in 1977. The only people using cocaine in the United States at that time are movie stars, rock stars, maybe some professional athletes. It's a high-end product. It's expensive. A kilo of cocaine costs somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000. Nobody had smuggled large-scale cocaine into the United States. People were smuggling kilos perhaps by sticking them down their pants or hiding them in their luggage. Very primitive ways of getting small amounts of cocaine into the country. Nobody had ever attempted something like this. So Willie, and later a partner named Sal Magluta, and a handful of young guys, 19, 20, 21 years old, decided that they needed to create a market for cocaine. The thinking was, if we can maybe bring down the price and make it more affordable, we can create a mass market. It was a bold concept. And so, you know what? That's what they did, and it took off immediately. People loved their cocaine. They could get their hands on the cocaine, and they could afford the cocaine. They loved their cocaine. It was a very interesting social phenomenon, cocaine. I mean, we all think of it as the ultimate party drug, discos, nightclubs, and certainly it was a snowstorm in those places. But it was everywhere. I mean, I live in New York, and I remember in the 80s working construction. There was cocaine on construction sites, in the bathroom of your local Blarney Stone, working class bar.
I can tell you for fact, I know for fact that real estate companies down in Miami would use their real estate to launder, to sell, to traffic. Real estate in Miami is huge, still to this day. Yeah, it was rare. It was just coming in. It was huge down there. Like the days of Miami Vice. That's when I lived down there. When it was like 81, 82. Not that it's like a big thing. Lots of people live in Miami and stuff, but not many get an inside look at what was really going on. All the people I know of were busted. These people were my neighbors, my parents' friends. We had one couple that lived next to us. Their friend was the Flan Company. They talked my father into working with them, and they used it as a front. We are talking about trafficking in Miami in the 80s. I'm going to show you where Ziggy is from, where she grew up, and what she would know because of where she grew up. Of course, she grew up in Indiana, but her father has had these condos for a long time, and it's not just one, it's a whole corporation. I shared them in my community post. I'm not accusing Ziggy's father of nothing. He has some really high-end condos down, what was it, 14th Street, I think. My dad was on 13th. I have to look. Down in the beach, which is actually like right around the corner from Tequila Willie's, is down the street. And then you have Versace's mansion. There's a guy that stands out there. Every time I go down there, I got to get a palm hat from him. He makes it, well, he used to. He's probably dead now. It's been a long time since I've been down there. Oh, thanks for joining. But there was a lot of like drug trafficking in that area in particular. So that's why it raises red flags to me, because Ziggy's from that area. And she knows a lot of these psychic techniques. She's had a green card marriage. I don't know what this guy's going to say. I can imagine. You're going to hear it. I want us all to sit back, just listen. For the next week or so, every few days, or maybe even every day, every time I find something, I'm going to show you something new on what Ziggy will know based on her life that I see. And then we're going to predict the future that Ziggy's going to jail for a long time, in my opinion. I'm speculating. She is a con artist, and I am going to show you all that. You're going to learn where Ziggy is from, in my opinion. I mean, it ain't every day people get green card marriages. I mean, it is. But not everyday people get green card marriages.
It became pervasive. And a lot of that had to do with Willie and Sal and the operation they created first in Miami, and then it spread and it spread and it spread. That's Los Muchachos. That's the core of the group. I would say a handsome looking bunch of guys in the prime of their lives. You know where that picture was taken? Las Vegas. When they really got successful at what they were doing and they wanted to celebrate their success, every New Year's they flew here to Las Vegas to rent rooms, to party, to spread the wealth. Las Vegas became their symbol of achievement and success. That's Willie and Sal seated there, and Gustavo Tavi Falcone, the younger brother, standing there. Those are the three guys who basically put this operation together. Among the things they became successful at once they got the cocaine business up and rolling, and it's kind of interesting some of the ways they did it. Beauty parlors. Beauty parlors were a big early source of cocaine. Beauty parlors. People would buy a brick, a kilo of cocaine, and sell it out of a beauty parlor. Steady stream of customers. And guess what? Women loved cocaine. They loved it. Another primary source of distribution was flight attendants. Starting in the late 70s and early 80s, flight attendants were a great way to spread cocaine around the United States because there wasn't much security back then. They could carry their luggage right onto an airplane and carry it right off. So flight attendants became major conduits for the smuggling of kilos and also the smuggling of cash, which very quickly became a big problem. The money. What do you do with all the money? How do you hide the money? How do you bury the money? These are things I would venture to say, Willie and Sal hadn't really thought about much when they first got into the business, but they became very adept at it, at laundering money. And one of the ways they did that was through a business that they created, the sailing of powerboat racing. Powerboat racing in Miami is about as popular as football is in Green Bay and Dallas. It's a huge cultural phenomenon. Everyone loves powerboat racing in Miami. Well, Willie and Sal decided, hey, why don't we start our own company to build boats, to build the engines for boats? And then, hey, why don't we learn how to race them and enter the national powerboat racing circuit? And you know what they did? Cubans are very competitive, and they're often very good at what they set their mind to. And they did it with cocaine, and they did it with powerboat racing, and they became powerboat racing champions, famous in Miami for that. Before they were ever known as cocaine dealers, they were known as boat racing champions. These pendants, this diamond-encrusted gold falcon, Willie Falcone created. This was back in 1982 or 83. They cost $1,500 a piece. I think he made 15 of them and gave them out to members, closest members of the organization, his brother, Sal Magluta, some of the others. I saw that and I don't know, it made me think of the Knights of the Round Table. I know that's a bit of a glorification, but that's how they saw themselves, a band of merry men. They were tight. They fully utilized the dynamics of the exile experience. Cubans created a world in Miami that's kind of unique. They really sort of created their own version of Cuba in South Florida. A lot of them didn't even feel the need to speak English. They only did business with other Cubans. There's never been anything quite like it. And they were phenomenally successful on many levels at creating a very politically powerful and economically successful community. Los Muchachos took full advantage of that. They knew that by being popular in the community through the boat races, but also the spreading of the wealth, they were known for giving money to charitable causes. They built baseball fields for schools, and they did all kinds of things that endeared them to the community. And just the parties at the boat races alone was enough to make a lot of people think they were great guys. And that's the reputation they had as they launched into the cocaine business. Now, I want to say a little bit about the cocaine era. I mean, I sense this is a crowd that lived through it and I guess survived it. So you have your own anecdotal memories of the cocaine era and how that was for you and people that you knew. The main thing, I think, one of the main things to remember about it is that when it picked up in the early 1980s, before the crack cocaine years, late 70s, early 1980s, when all of a sudden Willie and Sal have lowered the price of a kilo, first down to $40,000, and eventually they would lower it down to $18,000 for a kilo, a product that was once $80,000. And they created a vast network shipping it to Los Angeles, to San Francisco, to Chicago, to New York. They had the best product at the best price. Wherever they could get it, they could sell it. It was phenomenal. And so what they had already seen happen in Miami quickly was happening in a lot of other places. Cocaine was fueling the entire era. And, Time and Newsweek magazines both wrote cover stories about cocaine in the early 1980s. And they were fairly benign articles about cocaine. They said there's really no downside to using cocaine. It's not addictive. It's not.
This dude literally just taught me something about my parents. Y'all know how I'm sitting here saying to you, oh, they had a fleeing company. They used to go to the boat races or to the boat sales races. I don't know what the fuck it was. They used to have big conventions. It was crazy down there. Like, I'm not fucking playing. We even used to go with them from time to time and run around. We knew what our parents were doing. We weren't allowed to talk. I didn't know this was going on, so he just taught me something. Now, y'all see what I'm saying? I'm corroborating my own life here. This is interesting. Okay. I'm happy I turned this on.
Not a problem, and everyone's using it. They weren't the first to say that. Sigmund Freud was the first. Sigmund Freud wrote a book called The Cocaine Papers back in the 1890s. He sort of discovered cocaine in Europe, and he loved it. No, really. His Cocaine Papers he thought it was the greatest thing to come along in a long time. And he would write letters to his wife just saying, I'm on cocaine now, and describing to her all the things he was going to do to her sexually when he got home. He really loved it. I mean, he had a reaction that a lot of people had when they first used cocaine. And if you don't know the downside and you don't know anything about it, you think it's a wonder drug. And a lot of people got sucked into believing that it was a wonder drug. And by the way, a lot of people used it and didn't get addicted. So there's that. I mean, I think there's a certain degree of sensationalism about how we think about cocaine. A lot of people use cocaine and never got addicted. Anyway, but that explains this era. People were using it. Not everyone became an addict. I asked Willie Falcone, what's it like to be in an organization where there's an unlimited supply of cocaine around you all the time? Didn't you have problems? Didn't you have members of your organization becoming addicts? He said, no. First of all, he said, Latinos don't use cocaine necessarily that way. He said, we used it like coffee. We'd take a bump before we played basketball. We'd use it throughout the day. Nobody became addicted. One guy became addicted, and he was not a Cuban. He was a gringo, and he was an important part of the organization. His name was Jack DeVoe, and he was a CIA-connected pilot, smuggling pilot, who they hooked up with early on, and he was a very daring guy who would bring cocaine loads in from Colombia and land them in the islands, or eventually when Los Muchachos built their own landing strip in Central Florida, thanks to a corrupt judge, he was bringing them into Central Florida. Jack DeVoe became addicted to what's called bazuco, which is
I had a time in my life where I was becoming a cocaine addict. My son got sick. It was from the time of his birth till the time he was 8 months old. That shit was crazy. I had a really good job working in a nursing home. That's when my boy's father left me. I kind of sort of wanted him gone. Long story, I ended up with this dude, and he locked me in his fucking apartment for 3 motherfucking days. He wouldn't let me out. My babysitter was stuck with my kids. I was falling apart. I lost my job. Bam. 8 months into my addiction, my son gets sick. Thank God. Because God knows where I would have gone if he didn't. It changed my life. Cocaine is my most favorite thing on this fucking earth. I would love to do some fucking cocaine right now. Will I ever touch that shit again? Fuck no. We'll carry on. Just a little bit of tidbit information about me.
Cuban paste before it's fully processed into the white powder, and you smoke it in a pipe, and it's about 150 times stronger than cocaine. I mean, it's basically a precursor to what crack was, and it's highly addictive. And Jack DeVoe got hooked, and it saddened Willie Falcone. He greatly admired Jack DeVoe, and he couldn't believe that a pro like Jack DeVoe would succumb to the powers of this drug, but he did, and they had to let him go. Now, this being a story about organized crime, you might think, why didn't they kill Jack DeVoe? If he knows everything about their organization, in that world, you don't usually just, retire somebody. They know too much. But this brings up an interesting point about Los Muchachos. And this was kind of mind-blowing to me. And it took me a while to bend my mind around it. Where was the violence? How could you have a cocaine story at this level without Uzi submachine guns and chainsaws? And I asked Willie about it numerous times. Why was there no violence? He explained a few things. First of all, Los Muchachos were bringing cocaine into the country. They were going to Colombia, negotiating deals face-to-face with Pablo Escobar and others at the top level of the cartels. There weren't even cartels at that time, Medellin and Cali. They're bringing they're buying it there. They're bringing it into the United States, and they're selling it off to clients in large shipments, kilos. This is not nickel and dime bags. So they're selling it, and they didn't have that many clients. They had maybe 8 to 10 or 12 clients at any given time, and these clients were buying huge amounts of kilos and then selling it off to a dealer who sold it off to a dealer who sold it off to a dealer. And at every step along the way, it gets cut with different things to dilute the product. Los Muchachos were not dealing with weighing of the cocaine, any of that stuff. So that chain in which the product is sold and brought to the market is, by and large, that's where the violence takes place. The closer you get to the street level, the higher the level of violence in that business. The level Willie and Sal were at, they were insulated from that violence. They weren't really affected by it. So they were allowed to feel like their hands were clean. All that violence and dirty business was going on, but that wasn't them. And they took a certain amount of pride in that, particularly the wives and the girlfriends who wanted to believe that it wasn't a dirty business. Those other people do the violence, but we don't do that. So they were able to believe that for a while. I'll explain where that went wrong. That's Cuba, the western part of the island. I took that photo myself on one of my trips there. It's a pretty beautiful place, right? The power of Cuba is that it exists in your imagination once you've experienced it. And you would do anything for it if you were born in Cuba, anything to get back to that paradise. Eden, the Garden of Eden. These guys felt as if they'd been banished from the Garden of Eden. And their whole motivation, or at least this is what they told themselves, their motivation was that one day they would be back there. And maybe they even thought that making all these millions from selling cocaine was ultimately going to get them back to Cuba somehow. That's Willie and Gustavo. Those are the freedom flights coming and bringing. There's somebody you might know who they tried very hard to kill many times over, and they never did. That's Gustavo, Sal Magluta, Willie, and Willie's parents. Willie's parents, this is important because this book, The Last Kilo, starts with the kidnapping of Willie's parents, 1981, or was it 83? Something like that, early 80s. Up till that point, they'd had the cocaine business up and running for about 5 years. And as I said, no violence. It was all fun and games. And then Willie's mom got kidnapped. And it turned out she got kidnapped by rogue police officers. And all of a sudden, the world started to seem a little more complicated. And they paid a ransom to get her out of there. I think they paid $500,000, which was chump change for them. And what it did really is it brought fear and the danger and the threat of violence home into the world of Los Muchachos. Some members of the organization they interviewed said, as far as they were concerned, that's when it stopped being fun, when they realized members of their families could be kidnapped. So now they had to be armed. Most of the time, they had to have bodyguards. They had to assign bodyguards to their children to go to and from school. It became a much more perilous world. There's the coca leaf in Peru or Bolivia, one of those two places. That's someone called a raspachine who harvests the leaf. It's worth mentioning that this plant has been around, this plant predates human civilization. It took human beings to take this plant and turn it into a product that has brought about so much death and destruction and destroyed so many lives. And not only the plant destroying lives, but the illegality of the product, the war that's being waged on the product by governments and all the carnage and destruction that comes from that. There it is being processed into the white powder. It's a fairly convoluted process. It's done in these, what they call labs. When I heard it called labs, I thought, wow, that must be, like a building. No, the labs are very primitive. It's poor people in these countries that harvest the plant, and they've been doing it for generations after generations. It's been passed on in their families. That's Willie Falcone and his wife, Alina. They look like Ken and Barbie. In fact, they kind of were the Cuban Ken and Barbie. Los Muchachos were dashing and handsome, and they really took advantage of it. They created a glamorous presentation in the community. Willie, he's about 27 years old there. He became the godfather. Because of his wealth and his stature in the community, people started to treat him like the Don, coming up to him and asking advice and asking questions and wanting him to help finance their businesses. He said it was a little bit embarrassing because he was so young at the time that he was thrust into this position of being the godfather. But he accepted it. That goes back to their wedding day. That's 19-year-old Willie Falcone and 18-year-old Alina in happier times, especially when I'm going to tell you what happened to Alina. That's Willie and Sal, and they're one of their Rolls Royces. We know who that is, Ronald Reagan, scowling at those bags of cocaine. This was the South Florida Task Force that was formed to kick off the war on drugs. Cocaine became so pervasive that by about 1983, the government began to bend their mind around how vast it was and that the coke was coming through the Caribbean islands. So they cracked down on it. They went to Congress and got tons of money, billions of dollars to launch the war on drugs, which is still with us to an extent today. And they had some early successes, but Willie and Sal and Los Muchachos were pretty inventive. So when the government started busting shipments in the islands and cracked down on corruption in the islands, and bringing the product directly into South Florida, they shifted and started bringing the kilos from Colombia up through Mexico into Southern California. They totally improvised and created a new system, and it blew everyone's mind in law enforcement because they thought they were winning. They thought they were having successes. But what they did was they forced the narcos to come up with a new plan, and that new plan involved Mexico. This was about 1986. We now think of Mexico as a narco state, and that's not inaccurate to say that. That really didn't start until the 80s. Up till then, Mexico smuggled bales and bales of marijuana into the United States, but not cocaine. That started when Willie and Sal devised a way to do it. The violence in South Florida, even though Willie and Sal were not violent and the Los Muchachos were not violent, there was violence happening all around them. Their primary partner, Pablo Escobar, was waging war against all of Colombian society. And that set the tone for a very violent era. So it was a violent business. No question about that. They were a family. Los Muchachos were a family. I've written a number of books about criminal organizations, and I've interviewed a lot of gangsters from different ethnicities: Irish, Italian, Vietnamese, Jamaican, and others, Chicanos. And I knew right away, interviewing these people, that they weren't like that. In fact, they weren't really even gangsters. These were not people with criminal records who had done time in prison or anything like that. These were Cuban exiles that stumbled into this product and were looking to make the most of it. They thought they were in pursuit of the American dream. They didn't think of themselves as gangsters, and they really weren't. Yes, it was an illegal operation, and it was a very dangerous illegal operation.
There was this lady that lived down the street from me. I don't remember her name, but my parents would go there all the time. And it was the coolest fucking house ever because the lady had this hot tub that was like in the jungle. Like, these people were elaborate. They had a shit ton of money. The neighbor I was telling you about earlier, directly next to us, fucking beautiful white owls. Everybody had a fucking monkey. My mom and I watched this monkey hang itself. Freaking swear to God. It jumped through the window and down. It was traumatizing. And that was another house. I used to swim in their pool. All these type of people were my neighbors. I grew up all around them, Ziggy. I can see a mile away what the fuck is going on with you. A mile. Couple that with what I know about the windmills and all that other shit, and we got problems. Now, my question to you is, you keep going over there and saying, she's lying, this one's lying. Let's do this. What you're not doing is addressing what I've been saying. How about you do that? Can we hear you address everything I've been saying about you? Deny it. I see what's going on a mile fucking way.
Certainly a very lucrative illegal operation. But this was a family, and they thought of themselves as they thought of their entire criminal organization as an extended family. And it's worth knowing that, because I think in some
Let me add, this is a speculation channel. This is commentary on my own opinions and my own thoughts, and it's not meant to harm anybody in any way possible. It is just for me to point out things that I see publicly in the case of Summer Wells. Carry on.
In some ways, it was the secret of their success. It's why they couldn't be penetrated. It's why everyone who was in this group was incredibly loyal. It was mostly brothers and brother-in-laws and cousins. It was tight-knit group. They worked together and they partied together and they celebrated together. The boats, they built these boats. Their company was called Seahawk. Beautiful boats. I mean, I'm not really into that sport, but I had to admire the craftsmanship of the boats and the engines. And I asked Willie, who was a champion boat racer, about the boats. And he said, you have to be.
I'm going to be honest with you. This is really fucking blowing my mind a little bit while we're watching this. Boy, I was a little kid. That is not how I remember. Oh, a lot of shit just made sense to me. I fucking swear to God. Let me see that red boat. I have pictures somewhere of my dad. I'll give the first name. The neighbor's name was Felix. I need to see a picture of that red boat. My dad was all into that shit, guys. Like, if you think I don't know what I'm talking about, I really fucking do. This really could be a thing with Ziggy just based on where she has lived. Add to it that she married Fred Hill. You got yourself a problem. I want her to address the things I've been saying instead of making this is for the trolls and making up fake readings for people. Address me, Ziggy. You're a fraud. You've been going to them psychic shops your whole motherfucking life, haven't you? I cannot wait till one day I don't sound crazy and I'm able to tell you about my psychic experience down in Miami. It leads me to you, Ziggy, right there on that corner. That's so fucking wild. Maybe I'm the one with the predictions. Dude, that's so fucking weird. It really is. But them psychics are fake. I swear to you, they are. You should see the shit that goes down there. It isn't just psychic shops and hair salons, as he said. It's boat races. It's the Miami-Dade County Fair. It's politicians. It's too big for us to crack. However, it could just be Ziggy came here selling a bunch of fucking YouTubers a bunch of shit and laundered a whole shit ton of fucking money. So that's why I say it can or cannot connect to Summer. But you married Fred Hill, Ziggy. If you think that the police are not investigating this, they are. Laura stayed with the Heads, Glenda Head. She did her interview with Ziggy right from that woman's living room while collecting money. And Karen is on the motherfucking panel. Come address my claims, Ziggy. Told you last night I'm done. I'm going to show you who I am and where I'm from. And I'm going to show these people who you are and where you're from. You're just a little fucking fraud that was running around them fucking beaches, going into them psychic shops. Your daddy had a job. You knew a little bit about it. In my opinion, you came to YouTube and you sold these creators a story and some stock while marrying Fred Hill because something really is going on down there in Ben Hill. That's my opinion. I'm speculating. You've been like this your whole life. And I told you last week, I'm going to show everybody who you are. I can see it 1,000 million trillion miles away. You con artist.
very courageous and very crazy. That's the crew. They had a good time. When they were in the thick of all this, like a lot of gangsters, when they're in the thick of it, they thought it would never end. They thought they were on top of the world. They were young and full of themselves. And they weren't thinking about what the consequences might be in the long run. There's Willie Falcone. The Mutiny nightclub. The Mutiny nightclub. This is a rare photo from inside the Mutiny nightclub, which was in Coconut Grove in Miami. You know, Miami's a very sexy city. I think we can say that. When Miami struts its stuff, the sensuality in Miami, the weather, the music can be very exciting. And these guys created an era that was about as exciting as it gets. In the center of that universe was a nightclub called the Mutiny. It was based inside of a hotel. And the Mutiny was quite a place. Cocaine everywhere. And it was kind of like Rick's Cafe in Casablanca. It was the crossroads of cops and agents went in there. Celebrities went in there. High-ranking members of the anti-Castro organization went in there. Everybody passed through this place, and they loved it. And it became a symbol of their success. Whenever a new load of cocaine came into town, Willie would get a call. You had to have a phone with a jack, and you'd have it right at the table. And he'd get a call that the shipment came in. And when the shipment came in, he told the DJ to play a song called Making It, kind of a corny disco song by a guy named David Naughton. And when that song played in the club, everyone in the club knew a new shipment of cocaine had just come into town. And they all went up to Willie. Hey, how is it? Is it good? Is it the same price as last time? Where do I get it? Where do I find it? Willie said when that happened and he was in the club, he said he felt like he was at the center of the world. Those are kilos that were confiscated. Dozens and dozens more make it through. Law enforcement loves to show those off when they get them, but you have to say, if that's what they caught, how much more is in circulation? That's Miami around 1990s, mid-1990s. None of that, very little of that was there in the early 1980s. Cocaine created this city. It recreated this city. A lot of the cocaine money, Willie and Sal weren't the only cocaine dealers in town. They may have been the biggest, but there were many others. Money was funneled into real estate. I talked to real estate people in Miami for this book, and they said, yeah, most real estate deals were made with suitcases filled with cash. That's how real estate deals were made in Miami. That's Pablo Escobar. And seated to the right of him in the white turtleneck is Carlos Lader.
Lady, or go hurry up, get to your live, and go tell me how money laundering works again. Since you think I'm fucking stupid. Oh, I might play stupid. Bitch, I know all about this shit. I probably know more than you do. Carry on.
Was a major player in the Colombian cartel. That's our man, George Bush, who took over for Reagan. And you may remember this speech where he claimed to have some of his men claimed to have found crack being sold in the park across the street from the White House. You remember this one? Somewhere around 1987. And then it turned out it was all a stunt. It was all a stunt. The war on drugs was underway. Manuel Noriega was one of the things, and I'm going to wrap it up here pretty soon, but I want to give you a sense of the full dimensions of the narcosphere. Willie and Sal plugged into the narcosphere. The narcosphere is a realm of operation that is larger than any boundaries or nation states. It's a place in which cocaine business is done, and it's vast. And it's unseen. Law enforcement has had a hard time bending their mind around the concept of the narcosphere, a product that is grown in Peru and Bolivia, processed in Colombia. The financial center of the narcosphere was Panama. That's where the money was laundered. Later, Mexico becomes the major transshipment corridor for the product. And then where's the largest market? The engine that makes the whole thing run? United States of America. That's the narcosphere. Manuel Noriega was friendly with narcos and with governments, including the US government at the same time. He played both sides of the fence until the fence came tumbling down and he was arrested. The chubby guy over there took over as president of Panama. His name was Guillermo Endara. You know what? He was Willie and Sal's personal money launderer. He's a banker. They were laundering their money through his law firm. The United States of America knew he was a banker to the narcos, not just Willie and Sal, but to Falcone and others. They still played a role. They handpicked him to become president of Panama after Noriega was deposed. Willie and Sal's money launderer, let me repeat that, became the president of Panama thanks to their primary benefactor, the administration of George Bush. I don't know what to say about that. That's Pablo Escobar when they finally caught up with him. That's a gruesome photo. I'll skip by that. Escobar. Willie and Sal eventually get caught. It's a fascinating story of how they get caught. They do get caught. And it's a big story in Miami, maybe the biggest story. It's John Gotti on steroids in Miami. It's a big story because these two guys, many in the community identify with these two guys. And so when they were being brought down, they had a fair share of sympathizers in the community who thought they were Robin Hoods, thought they were good guys. In fact, this will blow your mind, it blows my mind. When they finally go on trial, a major federal racketeering trial, they're found not guilty. And you know why they're found not guilty? They fixed the jury. Not just one juror, not just two jurors, not just three, not just four, 5 fixed jurors. 5 jurors, they were able to make their intermediaries were able to make contact with them and offer a payment. Some of the jurors they approached and offered a payment said to them, "You don't even have to pay me. I'm going to vote not guilty for Willie and Sal." That was their standing in the community. That's what the prosecutors were up against. I interviewed the prosecutors and the agents involved in the case, and they were stunned. They were shocked. They eventually figured out how that happened, and they were able to retry them, or they retried Sal. Willie took a plea, served 27 years in prison. That's Willie's family as he's awaiting trial. His wife, Alina. So Willie's being held in federal lockup in Miami, awaiting trial. And one day the lawyers come in the morning with a gloomy look on their face, and his lawyer says, "Willie, I have something to tell you. Your wife was murdered last night." Alina was on Miracle Mile. If you know Miami, that's like the Rodeo Drive of Miami, wealthiest part of the city. A couple young black guys tried to snatch her purse. She resisted, and they shot her in the face, killed her. Of course, this happened when the trial is about to start. So the rumor mill goes wild. Must have been a mob hit. There's even a rumor that Willie Falcone killed her. All sorts of crazy stuff. Willie said, honestly, when he first heard the report that it was just a couple young robbers, he didn't believe it either. He thought it had to be more than that. And so they were identified as black kids, and they were quickly found and arrested. And Willie went to a gang leader of the largest black street gang in Miami who was being held in the same prison as him. And he said, "I'll pay you $100,000 if you can find out who's behind this, if there was anyone behind it." And the guy, the gangster, his name was Boobie Williams, Boobie Williams asked around and came back to him and said, Falcone, as far as I can tell, nobody knows these guys. They are what the cops say they were, just some punks who came from Atlanta to rob rich-looking white ladies in Miami. And Willie said, okay, where do I have them send the $100,000? And the guy says, Falcone, you don't got to pay me nothing. So honor among thieves. The prosecutor, Patrick Sullivan, and another prosecutor, Chris Clark, who handled the case. Patrick Sullivan was a legend in Miami. He prosecuted Manuel Noriega. He prosecuted a bunch of corrupt cops in Miami. Very upright character. Now there's Willie Falcone. So Willie Falcone takes a plea. He gets a sentence of 25 years in prison. Boom, he's gone. Somewhere around year 26, he has his daughter contact me and say, Willie Falcone's about to get out of prison and he's interested in maybe writing a book about his life. He knows your work and he wonders if you'd be interested. He's read a couple of your books in prison. Inmates have a lot of time on their hands and many of them are well read. They mostly read crime books.
Probably not, because I mean, they were young. Maybe. How old did he say? What? Maybe. He looked older then, so I think he would be. Maybe. They might still be alive. I'm sure there's still organizations down there, many of them. Micah Miller. Oh, yeah. Lots of pleas, sturdy. I don't think Ziggy's that far in, guys. Don't think I think that. I just think she's a moron that sold information that she knows because she went to school for business to learn. Her dad is seriously in this like electric company windmill shit. And I'm telling you, I know all it. Listen. It's embarrassing to even admit, but my dad was a fucking asshole. He was brain dead, in my opinion. He was mean. He had a surgery due to the accident that he had that he won that lawsuit for, and they took the part of his left temporal liberal, my mom always fucking talked about it, of his brain out while she was pregnant with me. So I never knew him to be normal. Smart man. So smart. He probably could have ran the shit. He might have ran some shit that I don't even fucking know about. However, his temper, because he couldn't control his anger, which is why I still love the man. You know what I mean? Like, he treated us like shit, but he couldn't help it because of this brain surgery he had. And people that dealt with him didn't know that. And he would snap the fuck out if somebody didn't say something he liked. You know what I mean? So he ruined a lot of shit in his life, and he made some of these people really mad. However, he stayed down in Miami. I don't know what he did to make them mad, but he stayed down in Miami for 30 years, so maybe it was a fucking ploy, because at the time, all of this shit would have been going down. Him and my mom got divorced. He kicked us out of the fucking house after beating my mom's ass. We lived on the beach for 3 fucking days. It was awful. She had to beg for money. Here's my dad with all this fucking money, living in a house for free that his friend from up here gave him. Making money, dealing, not only dealing, but taxiing while dealing. I don't know what the fuck that man was all doing. I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. I didn't go back down till I was 14. And then in my teenage years, I was there often. As an adult, I tried to move down there, but you literally got to launder money to live there. It is fucking expensive, and you got to know how to speak Spanish. When I was younger, I learned Spanish, but it's very easy to forget, and I don't know very much. I know bad words. I could tell somebody to shut up and sit down and eat a booger. Other than that, I can count. But it's hard. It's hard to get a job down there if you're not bilingual. So as an adult, I moved down there with my first husband. We lasted 4 months. I came right the fuck back. I couldn't. I was so homesick. I love Pittsburgh. I love my city. We got the best Steelers fans. It's like a holiday every football season up here for months. All right, let's listen to some more.
And so I say no. I mean, I didn't know the man. I didn't know enough about Willie Falcone to be able to say yes to something like that. But I was intrigued, and I said to the daughter, "Has he ever put anything down on paper, and like a memoir or anything?" And she said, "I don't think so." I said, "Well, why don't you have him do that or start that? It would be incredibly valuable. Whether I do the book or some other writer does the book, he's probably going to want to."
You know what's crazy, Marion? I never really grasped life until Summer Will's case, because I've always thought this is normal life. This is shit I've grown around my whole life. And then to watch your mom become an addict and all your siblings become an addict and most of your friends become an addict. The other ones become greedy. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard. Drugs do. And I personally think, you guys think cocaine was bad back then. I think it's far worse now, because cocaine didn't kill people. Cocaine just gave them a high and made them fucking brain dead. Made people commit crimes. You throw what we have today in 2025 in the fentanyl, the pressed pills, all the fake shit that's coming from the borders and down there. Trust me, I'm educated in this shit. I grew up around this shit my whole fucking life, on both ends, the rich side and the poor side. Please understand that. That's why I think I'm seeing what I'm seeing on here. The windmills are huge stock market business. Not only is it a huge stock market business, but growing weed fields can mask other shit going on in the area. It is my opinion. I am speculating someone like Karen Renfro or somebody in her family wants to develop on the land in that area. Fred is a part of that family. Just so you all know. Okay. This is just my thoughts. And I'm saying them. And it's been my thoughts since the very day I got the deed off of Gigi. Isn't that funny, Ziggy? You're going down, bitch, in my opinion. You fraud.
And do something like that. Then he got deported. When he got out of prison, he'd never bothered to get U.S. citizenship, because Cubans had special dispensation when it came to immigration in the United States. He never really needed it for any reason. And the other thing was, as I mentioned before, he thought he was going to go back. A lot of Cubans had this dream they were going to go back. So they didn't want to renounce their Cuban citizenship. So anyway, they said, we're going to deport you. And where you usually get deported is to the country of origin. He said, if you send me back to Cuba, I'll be put to death. That's like a death sentence. They know I'm a notorious figure in the anti-Castro movement. And so they have hearings about that, and they say, okay, we won't send you to Cuba, but you got to find some country that will take you. So the Dominican Republic agreed to take him. And then he got to the Dominican Republic and he became a political hot potato in the media. Oh, this notorious narco one politician attacked the other politician for letting him in the country. So they booted him out of the Dominican Republic. He went hat in hand looking for another country. While all this was going on, I thought there would never be a Willie Falcone book. And I said, look, I got to make a living. I went on and wrote another book, a book called Dangerous Rhythms, Jazz in the Underworld, which I was here to talk about a couple years ago. And so I got to the end of the writing of that book, and they contacted me again. They said, Willie had another writer, but that writer left the project. If you want to do this, he's now fully available to do it. And I said, well, did he write that manuscript, the memoir? They said, yeah, it's 2,500 pages long. And I said, that's great. I mean, I knew it was going to be a difficult read. English is not his first language. He dropped out of high school. But I said, get it to me as soon as you can. And it was a treasure trove of information about his life. When I saw that, I realized I can do this. I still had to meet him. I went to the country where he was living, the country that shall remain nameless. And it was really difficult because it was in the middle of COVID. So it was really complicated flying in and out of there and finding him, connecting with him. But we were able to do that. And the interviews with Falcone became the nucleus of this book, The Last Kilo. And not only that, Willie opened the door for me to all the other members of the organization who had never talked to anybody. Most of them gone, kept their mouths shut, did not become snitches, went off to prison serving sentences from 12 to 15, 18 years. Willie's was 27. Sal Magluta is still in prison and probably will never get out because it's believed that Sal was involved in some murders. That's the story of Los Muchachos in a nutshell. That's just kind of skimming the surface. It's a story with a lot of dimensions to it. Taught me a lot of things that, about the cocaine era and the cocaine business. It changed my perceptions about a lot of things related to that business. And so I think what we're going to do is open up to questions. If there's questions out here in the audience, I hope there is.
You can just raise your hand and I'll come over to you.
How did you get interested in writing these books?
This is a third of a trilogy of books I've written about Cuban American culture. I was fascinated, I'm still fascinated by the Cuban Revolution, the consequences of the Cuban Revolution, the fallout from the Cuban Revolution, and the effect that had on matters in the United States, particularly criminal matters. So I'd written a previous book, as I mentioned, called The Corporation. And, but that didn't touch on cocaine at all. This was the cocaine era. And I knew I had to write a book about the cocaine era. I mean, this is my 10th book. I've sort of been chronicling organized crime in the United States over the last 100 years, writing about it from many different ethnic angles and historical angles. And I knew I had to write a book about the cocaine era because of the significance of that era in the lore and in the history of organized crime. So I was excited. I was thrilled. This was a book that I felt had been incubating in my imagination for a long time.
How many times have you been to Cuba, and what was the basis for your admission?
I've been to Cuba 7 or 8 times. I started, the first time I went was in the mid-90s with my wife. At the time, it was just a trip. It wasn't on research. I kind of did what people were doing at that time, which was sneaking in through the back door. I think we flew through the Bahamas into Havana. By the way, the Trading with the Enemy Act and the embargo that went along with that does not prohibit U.S. citizens from going to Cuba. It prohibits U.S. citizens from spending money in Cuba. So it's not illegal. It's never been illegal to go to Cuba. But if you can't spend money there, you can't really go to Cuba. And so the first time I went was just out of love. You know what it was? It was love for Cuban music, Afro-Cuban music. I adore that music, and it really drew me in to learning about Cuban culture.
It's
And that was
good.
before I got involved with writing criminal stuff. Then when I did a book called Havana Nocturne, which is the first of the trilogy I was talking about, this was a book about the era of the mafia in Cuba in the 1950s, Meyer Lansky, Lucky Luciano, and, who were building a little X-rated Shangri-La there in Havana until Fidel Castro came along and ruined the party. Then I wanted to do research.
All I've been doing is chain smoking for the last 3 days. I need to quit. It's stress and anxiety. I'm sorry, guys. I'm moving that fucking cigarette ashtray way over there and my cigarettes. When you guys see me light a cigarette up one after the other, be my helpers and tell me to put it the fuck out. Okay.
There, so I had to go legally, and I've applied for a license from the U.S. Treasury Department to go to Cuba and do legal research there. And so I went there legally to do research. I've since gone many times. I fly, once they started direct flights right out of Miami, if you remember during the Obama years, they kind of loosened up on things, became a lot easier to go there. I even hosted a mob tour of Havana, where we went around all the old hotels and nightclubs and locations that were prominent when the mob was there. So yeah, I've been there a long time, and I have a feeling I'm not done with it yet. Yes, sir.
Yes, I wanted to ask you, thank you very much for your work and for your writing. I'm
Thank you.
very familiar with your writing, especially on Cuba. And I've been to Cuba myself a few times. Wanted to ask you, where do you feel, is Cuba still a threat in the Western Hemisphere? This last summer, we've had a Russian sub, right? We had this covert connection with drugs and stuff.
My coffee's
Where
cool.
is that? Is that
Yeah.
kind of lost in the wind given the history? What do you think is on the
I do
horizon?
not think Cuba's a threat. And I think it's a weird and strange tragedy that there's still an embargo and that we still hold on to the Cold War attitudes towards Cuba. It makes no rational sense to me. That's my opinion. Obviously, Willie Falcone and Los Muchachos feel quite differently about it. So that's one of the interesting challenges of writing a book about it. You know, I don't know if Willie Falcone knows my views. Probably not. We chose not to get into those kinds of discussions. But that's how I feel about it. I think Cuba is now in an extreme state of poverty. The COVID crisis really hit that place hard. And they're struggling. And I think that if we were to allow capitalism to wash over Cuba, it would change the place completely. If we ended the embargo and allowed trade with Cuba, I think the remnants of communism in Cuba would collapse and not be able to keep up with the idea of free market. So I find it counterproductive. Our attitudes towards Cuba is stubborn and counterproductive. And I say this a lot of times in Florida to the hardline anti-Castro people that are still, I mean, it's like they don't know Castro died or something. And I say, if you really want to change Cuba, then end the embargo and allow trade. It will change Cuba quickly, I think. But I think what they wanted, they want revenge. Like I said, they dreamed of killing Fidel with their bare hands. They want revenge. They want revenge because they were humiliated and chased out of Cuba in a very humiliating way. And it was traumatic. It's an entire generation with PTSD from that. And I do think in some ways, Los Muchachos and this cocaine era is a consequence of that.
Let me tell you what I think about Cuban people. I love their culture. I grew up around them as a child. I love their music. I love their food. Plantains, fried the right way, are amazing. I see them as normal people, just like I see the Guatemalans like normal people, and I don't like how everybody's been talking about the extradition shit. So can we keep that part of politics out of my chat? It starts fights and just things like that, and I really don't want to give my feeling on it. I don't mean that rudely. Let's just keep all of that unless it comes into this case. Other than that, I don't want to talk about that. But I find Cubans to be very beautiful, very cultural. They gather in families. You could feel the love coming out of the music, smell their food. It isn't like the best food. I would say I like Mexican food better. But like, I'm not really into the sandwiches. Their espressos are fucking amazing. If you ever had one really made from their beans, real Colombian beans, I don't see them any different than anybody else, just like I don't see anybody of any race any different than anybody else. And they went through a hard era, and I went to school with all of the children. I played with them. My other neighbor, the one they were old. They had a lemon tree in their yard, and we weren't allowed to use knives, and we'd take the fucking lemons off the tree and smash them off the ground. Cut them open, take them in, wash them off, and spit them out. Florida lemons they sort of have a sweet taste to them. They're so good. I had a mandarin tree in my backyard, a coconut tree on the side of my house. Like, I really lived there, guys. Like, I really lived through this. It's not a fucking lie. I don't give a fuck how many people say I'm fucking crazy. Fuck you, Benny. Fuck people for making me doubt myself. Yesterday, I seen everything I needed to see. Lemonade trees. Yeah. None of us were old enough to use knives. We used to have to fucking smash them off the fucking ground. There was an island right down the street, and they changed it recently, but there was an island right down the street from me that nobody was allowed on. I used to be allowed on that motherfucker. I used to go over there and play with the one little boy that lived on it. I don't even fucking know his name. There used to be, it's like, I'll show you guys. I showed you on a map once before. I don't know. I lived 2 blocks. I grew up on a street 2 blocks from that condominium that fell down there. I could tell you how the condominium they built right next to it that's super huge, that might be part of a real estate thing down there, because I find it odd. They're not supposed to build down their door like with the codes the way they do, and it caused the old building next to it to fall down and kill many Jewish people, because it's also a very Jewish community up in Surfside and Bell Harbor. But the hotel next to that, yeah, they used to run drugs out of there. The one they built, it used to be a Holiday Inn. I could give you guys all kinds of secret shit that goes on down there. Or did. I don't think it's the same kind of business today. I think it's a lot different, but the same. I think it's more, and I think the more dangerous drugs that come into our country causes problems. I think it causes problems like what's going on with Summer Wells right now. I truly believe Ziggy's running a scam. That's truly my own opinion. Even the way she's acting right now doesn't make sense. Why aren't you denying this? Why aren't you saying, no, this is what I did in Miami. This is my ex-husband. This is the story. I'm not going to go digging into you, Ziggy. I told you I'm done doxing people. I have everything I need, in my opinion. And I hope the feds will one day find it too. because it's truly my opinion. You don't just slip out of a fucking airplane after you've driven to Tennessee a million times and marry somebody in the middle of the night. Well, you have people, big donors to the billboards in your chat. People holding wrenches, lying. Brittany's never been back to mod for you again. Or is she the main mod? I'm over this shit with you people. I don't know what else to say. I see it a mile away. If anybody else wants to go dig and look into this and go down this route, please, by all means, help me. Make her stop. She's still collecting money over there, while causing all this harm in Summer's case, no matter what the situation is. She's a con artist, in my opinion. Too many red flags with her. You don't just marry a suspect in a case and have access to everybody that he's around. And you got Sage up here. This lady's harassing Jody Sue for 3.5 years. We all think that she's cool with Jody. I thought she was cool with Jody. Quit being scared to say the names that are coming out here and fucking with people. It really does cause people to think all kinds of crazy shit. She's running her mouth about me right now. Who gives a fuck? We'll go watch it in a minute. Let's finish this up. There's a couple more minutes left. Then we'll go, what channel is she on? Who gives a fuck? She ain't even worth watching no more, giving no money to. If I was everybody, I would just turn the fuck away from her. No matter what way you look at this, she grew up around con artists, in my opinion. That's where she hung out. Even if she's not doing what I'm saying she's doing, she learned very well. Bitch is a con artist.
I have a question for you. Did you ever mention Jorge Valdez in an interview with him? Did you ever mention his name, that childhood friend that grew up with them?
Yes, Jorge Valdez, yes. He's a guy who takes a lot of credit for having started cocaine in Miami. And he badmouths Willie and Sal every chance he gets. If you saw the Cocaine Cowboys documentary, he's in it a lot, badmouthing Willie and Sal. It's odd because I think he became like a born-again Christian or a Christian minister or something. But somehow the notoriety that came the way of Willie and Sal, and he kind of became a forgotten guy, that sticks in his craw. So you've probably, if you know who he is, you've probably heard him on podcasts and talking about this era. I think he's kind of a phony.
I think we have one more question.
Okay,
I've got one for you, TJ.
all right.
So you alluded to this during your talk, but Miami at that time was a different kind of place, as we've come to see. In your research, what happened with Miami after this cocaine era?
Still a lot of cocaine in Miami.
That's another thing too. All these people from Tennessee can know Ziggy the same way. Because think about this, okay? How many tourists come to Tennessee? Come from Tennessee to Miami. How many? It's probably one of our country's most biggest tourist area. The Keys, Miami. How many of the people in this case have a real estate license? Especially one sitting on panel with Ziggy, in my opinion. Trashing her sister on other panels. Talking about the police are following her. Good. That means they know.
It's still a sexy city. It's still It still likes to party. It's still, I don't think Miami feels chastened by the cocaine era. I think they kind of have the attitude that you might have if you went out partying for like 2 days, coke, alcohol, out on the boats, and you came home and you slept it off for a few hours, and then you woke up and you said, what the fuck was that? That's kind of where Miami's at. I think there's actually kind of a source of pride that they lived through it and survived it. There was a lot of violence, a lot of craziness, but they kind of have absorbed it into the personality of the place. I don't.
My memories of growing up down there, if I had to tell you what Miami is today, it would be I still believe there's a lot of hidden crime. That's all I'm saying. I think it's a different sort of crime. There was a lot of S stuff that went on back then. I think it's worse now. But it was pretty bad. And we're going to get into that this week, the street walking and stuff down there. Oh, I promise. I'm going to show you all of Miami's finest. I might even go to that corner and see if we could watch some bars. Hey, do you know, Ziggy, actually right around that corner right there is a live cam that shows all the fucking time. We can go down there and watch the live cam and see all the shit come out from the fucking bars. Right there across the street. Is it Mangoes? No. I want to say it's Tequila Willie's. It's like an entrance onto the beach. I'd have to go look, but it's like right there on 12th or 13th Street. So I could go down there and show these people actually in live time what it's like down there when the fights break out, when the police are running through there down on Ocean Drive. Bitch, you're done. I fucking promise you. I know exactly where you hung out at. You dumb, stupid, motherfucking, psychic fucking believing, hanging with the weirdos, beach bums of fucking Miami Beach. That's what you did, ain't it? You little scammer, you.
The cocaine business exists on the level that it did now. I mean, that it did then, now. I don't think there's a major distribution network that dominates the business like Willie and Sal did anymore. There's still cocaine there and they still party, and the personality of the city I don't think has changed that much. They kind of just took the blow and went on with their lives. It's kind of an admirable thing about that city. They rolled with the punches, so to speak. Now, some of this depends on who you're talking to. I think law enforcement people who were working during that era, the level of homicides and how difficult that job was during that era, are glad it's over and feel that it was a dark period that the city should be ashamed of. But I don't know if a lot of Cubans in Miami are necessarily ashamed of it. They're glad it's over. But, you know, I'm sure what they would say to you is, it was what it was. It is what it is. It happened. These are the reasons it happened, and so be it. Well, I guess that's it. Thank you very much. By the way, I'm going to be signing books. I'm in the back room there. I'm signing books.
There you go, Ziggy. There you go, audience. There's some education for you. I'm not saying Ziggy's connected to these people. I'm just showing you what the lifestyle is down there. That's exactly what I'm doing here. And how it could play into Summer Wells' case when people have real estate down there. And it's more than just Ziggy. There's some very people that sit on Ziggy's panel. that has real estate down there. There are very other people that played games in here that has real estate down there. It's very possible these people know each other. It's also very possible it's completely different, and Ziggy's just a very big con artist. There are so many directions we can go here, Ziggy. Come deny it, please. That's my opinion. But let's go see, what else should we watch? Do we have to watch Ziggy? Nobody's even chatting. I'll get off. I guess nobody gives a fuck. Right? Usually how it goes. People go push that bitch her fucking money. Whatever. I'm gonna go. I'll talk to you all later. Real estate. Yeah, you think? I don't really follow Sabat. I don't follow really any case but this. I watch Gypsy Rose. I watch the Diddy shit. I'm trying to stay out of kids' cases. Nope. She definitely didn't. I think Ziggy's just been taught really good hanging out down there on them beaches. I can't wait to hear when something comes out or when somebody will admit something or say something. Say, yeah, that's what happened. She swindled me. AB swindled me. That's what we need. Because all you little people, you little ones that bought the bomb and whatever the hell's going on, if you invested in stocks with them, I don't know that anybody did. I'm just saying, if anybody invested in stocks with any of these creators, you better start figuring some shit out. Because it's noticeable. And if I noticed it and you think the feds didn't, they have. It's actually quite stupid to do something like that right in the public. In my opinion, that's how big criminal networks are going to go on, get taken down forever. So maybe keep it up. Fist bump. Because one day you're going to go down. I can't bring you down. Only the feds can. And unfortunately, I think this may be bigger than we think because... Hi, Ziggy. Whew. And anybody else? Like I said, I just think y'all met somebody from the right side, from the same side of the tracks, but that's not a criminal, but knows a whole hell of a lot of fuck about it. Right? What else you want to put up on that land? Stupid. Stupid. You don't do shit like that in the public. Guys. Okay? Dumb criminals. Give Summer back. Tell us what happened to Summer. Dawn and Candace, if you're guilty, stop the shit in your area. Say it. Take the fucking blame. If you know what happened to your daughter, say it. Tim Mullen, every day suck my fucking ass. I'm going to go. If I find something else fun to watch, maybe I'll be back. If not, I actually think I have something else I need to do. I'll talk to you later. Peace and love. Bye.